day 4. So by now, the rhythm of retreat is in full roll, right? We're beginning to, the sits feel like they're coming closer and closer together, and we're hurting less, I hope. Yeah, and we're beginning to sit a little more deeply, and those koans are beginning to work on us a little more strongly, or those precepts, yeah. And we're really looking and challenging a lot of the things that we traditionally believe have made up ourselves, right? That glue that kind of holds us together is loosening a little bit. And we're beginning to see there's another way to live other than in constant fear or in constant dread of what's going to come up next, or how is this going to be resolved, or what's the next line of the story. And we begin to live a little more freely and just be present with what is. So we have Reverend Kaido joining us today, newly ordained Buddhist priest. People ask what a Buddhist priest is. I think the best definition is it's Reverend Kaido. Yeah? Not just because of her her recent ordination, but her whole practice is around kind of being present with what is required to keep a center running. So she handles business affairs, she handles when somebody spills something on the floor, making sure the cushions are on the right place, everything behind the scenes to make it all go. And yet by being behind the scenes and being that supporter, she is the practice, she is the show, she loses herself completely in it. So it's an honor to have her here practicing with us. Would you mind grabbing the microphone for the Q&A section at the end? So we've been talking a lot of cases this week from the Mumonkan, and I don't want to spoil the trend, and so we'll spend a little bit of time talking about another case in the Mumonkan. It's the 40th case, and it's called Kicking Over the Water Jug. When Master Isan was under Hyakujō, he had the position of tenzo. Tenzo means cook. Hyakujō wanted to choose a master for Mount Taii. He called the head monk and the rest of his disciples together to have them present their views, and said that the outstanding person should be sent. Then he took a water jug, put it on the floor, and said, "You may not call this a water jug. What will you call it?" The head monk said, "Well, it cannot be called a wooden sandal." Hyakujō then asked Isan. Isan immediately kicked over the water jug and left. Hyakujō laughed and said, "First monk, you've been defeated by Isan." And so he ordered Isan to found the new monastery. So as usual, right, we have a koan here, and all koans are a call for us to let go of what's holding us back, to let go of the thoughts and concepts that grow like weeds, right, in our mind, that latch themselves on to structures and make them appear like they're intractable, right? Make these issues appear like they're substantial in our minds. But really, they're just a collection of weeds, yeah, that can be moved or strewn about at will. So as many of these koans go, this one has a backstory too. So there apparently was a large patron of the temple that Isan, Hyakujō, and the head monk were practicing at, and he came and said, "I'd like to have you found another practice center over there on Mount Taii." And he was how would you say it? A fortune teller, a soothsayer of sorts as well. This is more prevalent in Chinese culture, right, than it would be in our own. People took this seriously. So, well, and I suppose even more seriously, he was a patron. He wanted to fund the he wanted to fund the production. So it's like, absolutely, we'll take your soothsaying seriously as well, right? And so the teacher immediately said, Hyakujō said, I'd love to found a Zen center over there in the temple and go up there and teach. And he said, well, now Mount Taii is kind of like a broad mountain, and you're a very slight man. And if you were to go, I think there'd probably only be 1,000 disciples that would come to the mountain. 1,000 disciples. Boy, we'd love that here. But there, apparently, he said there was a lot more potentiality. He said, I believe with the right teacher on that mountain, there could be 1,500 disciples who would come. So Hyakujō said, well, I have 2 students that would be, you should consider for it. One is my tenzo, or cook, and the other is the head monk. So in a Japanese temple, the cook, the tenzo, is probably the second role, right behind the abbot. It is not a lowly role. You know, this is a very exalted role. This is usually someone who's practiced long, practiced hard, penetrated the great mystery, and is now going on to do work to support everybody else in their practice. It's kind of like the bodhisattva that holds the whole thing together. An army doesn't just travel on its stomach, so do people practicing at the Zen Center. So we have our resident tenzo here who works behind the scenes and holds everything together, right? And so Isan, the understanding was already a person of great accomplishment in a way. This is somebody who had spent quite a bit of time in practice, and now was busy supporting the eating needs of a very large temple. Yeah? And the head monk is also a very important role in the temple. This is somebody who carries out temple discipline. This is somebody who's making sure that the bells are being rung on time, that everybody is sitting correctly, that they're not off dawdling somewhere, right? That they're where they're supposed to be, when they're supposed to be there. And it's an example for everyone else to follow. And so in most cases, if you're going to found a new temple, the person that you would choose would be the head monk. So at any rate, Hyakujō says, I'll bring you these 2 characters and you can see them. And so the first one he brought through was the head monk. And the patron said, oh, he'd be a disaster. No, that's not your guy. And then he brought through the tenzo. And when he caught sight of the tenzo, he said, that's the one. That's the one who should go teach. He'll bring you your 1,500 disciples. And so, not to argue with a patron, Hyakujō agrees. And the head monk hears about it. So, generally the head monk is considered to be next in line, and for the next big assignment. Yeah. And so when the head monk hears about it, he says basically, I'll be damned if I'm going to be replaced by some kitchen dweller. Yeah, this is wrong. I'm the head monk. And so Hyakujō is now faced with a quandary. He's got a patron who wants to give money to build a temple, who's got an opinion. And Hyakujō probably has an opinion himself, but he also is trying to play this delicate balance between the personalities in this big practice center. And so he says, I know what we'll do. We'll have a short contest. I'll present you with a koan in real time, and whichever one of you gives the best answer, that will be the next teacher. And that's where this case comes from. So he brings in the water jug and sits it in the middle of the room and says, you can't call it a water jug. And he lets the head monk go first. Yeah. What will you call it? Well, you certainly couldn't call it a wooden sandal. It's funny. They say there's no humor in this practice, right? There's a lot of humor in this practice. So it's an interesting thing. Is that true? Could you not call it a wooden sandal? Is that microphone on? Couldn't call it a tennis shoe? He's joking because I think we went through a mondo similar to this. What does it matter what you call it? Right? I often wonder if the head monk didn't already have an exchange similar to this one and just got it backwards. You can call it by any name you want, right? That doesn't change the essence of what it is. We often go about our lives, wanting to, apprehend things by the way they present themselves, or how we call them rather than how they present themselves. The old adage that it is what it is plays out. Yeah? It truly is what it is. Yeah? Matters very little what we think of it. And so when we're presented with challenges, renaming the challenge, reframing it intellectually, isn't going to solve it. There are intractable problems in society if you try to approach them from the mind road. There's no way through. Yeah? But we spend all of our days sitting around, framing new arguments, forming new ideologies, putting ourselves in one camp or another, and the problem still remains, precisely as it was when it started. And we can see this in our own lives. And we have to constantly ask ourselves what is holding us back and recognize that the answer can't always be just, well, I'll just think of it in a different way. We have to work with what presents itself. We have to transform it. When there's suffering, we have to dive in there and become that bridge to recreate the wholeness. Yeah? We're defined by how we interact with what is, not by how we think about it. Now, you can argue that how you interact to a large extent is framed by how you think about it. So thinking is great. It is the thought that counts, just so long as that thought drives you to the correct action in that moment. There was this commercial campaign where a man walks in and goes, oh, honey, happy anniversary. I thought about buying you a diamond ring. And she goes, you're the best husband ever. And and of course the news, that would never happen, right? Would never happen. It's because at the bottom, it's not just the thought that counts. Yeah. And so really here, we're faced with a problem that isn't a problem in the first place. This decision on who's going to go lead that temple. And the head monk is showing that this decision really isn't much of a decision by his penetration of this great question. You certainly could call it wooden sandal. You can call it whatever you want. Yeah? Its essence isn't changed by what you call it. It's completely determined by the quality with which you interact with it. And so now the tenzo gets his time at bat. Now you got to imagine, if you're a tenzo at a large temple and you've been pulled out to go through this, I don't think Isan had an aspirational bone in his body at this point. I don't think he much cared who the next leader of that temple up on the mount was. He had more pressing concerns, and that was feeding who was around him. Yeah? So you want to know what the essence of a jug full of water is? How do you demonstrate that? And while at the same time, putting the question to rest so you can get back to what's important. How do you demonstrate that? Kicking it over is one way. There certainly was no question anymore about what the nature of that jug was. Yeah. As the mats, I'm sure, were all saturated with water, and this is the practice area. Who's responsible for cleaning this mess up? Oh, it's the head monk's problem now. And it is a real problem. So now we're brought back directly to what's in front of us. You can call it whatever you want. I call it a mess, I say you better get to work. Yeah. But even more importantly, what's it free Isan up to do? Get back to what was right in front of him. Yeah? Which was, he had to get back to the kitchen and feed all these monks. Sometimes we're called to face things that aren't neat and tidy. Sometimes we have to make a little bit of mess to get our lives back on track. Sometimes we have to face things as they are, yeah? And do things a little bit more creative or outside of the box. Yeah? But we have to appreciate that. When it's time to act, we need to act. Yeah? And he didn't just do that for his own edification. Right? He did that for the edification of everyone at that temple. And he went on. Master Isan is a master of great renown. It doesn't just occur in this case, he occurs in other cases. Very strong practitioner of the way. Mm-hmm. He knew how to dispense with the mind road. He knew where to put it. He knew how to put things in their proper place and get back to work. So what's going on in your life right now? Where's that water jug sitting? Yeah. What things do you need to dispense with? Can't call it a wooden sandal, huh? Actually, you can call it whatever the heck you want. Yeah. It's just time to move on. Yeah. To steel our intention, to actually look directly at what's facing us, and to manifest as compassion. Anything coming up for you on this case? Yeah, it's gonna be a mess. Yeah.
And it's kind of a mess. There are assumptions and illusions surrounding who did this thing in the past, or they're going to do it again in the future. So they're just so back and forth. Nobody actually just wants to sit down and talk to you now.
Yeah.
So scared.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sad to me. To see that. So I think it's time for me to just get over it. Get over it.
Now remember, even when when Isan did this, we tend to think of it, and he won, and the story's over. I guarantee, the temple wasn't built the next day. Isan still had to go to work, right? So you still have to work with the karmic consequences that come up from cutting the cord, right? So that, I'm sure, working with the head monk from that point forward wasn't a stroke of pure joy every day after that, yeah? But it cleared up the issue.
Move forward.
That's right. Now we can move forward. Now you know precisely where everything stands, and now we know where we're called to action. Yeah? So I encourage dumping the water jug, and at the same time recognizing that it's going to make a mess. But that's the only thing that we can do moving forward. It's like Kyogen's man up a tree. Some of you have had this go on. There's a man. He's up in a tree. He's clinging on by his teeth. And his hands can't reach a branch. His feet can't reach a bough. And suddenly a man appears and he says, "Oh, please, I'm suffering. I just need to know, why was it that Bodhidharma came from the west?" If you answer him, you fall to your death. If you don't answer him, you fail to fulfill your vow to work with suffering wherever you find it. At such a time as this, what do you do? Yeah? Everybody looks at that and goes, "Oh my gosh, it's such a confusing question." Is it a confusing question? How long are you going to hold on by your teeth anyway? What are you clinging to? Yeah? There's only one thing that's going to happen here. You're going to fall. What's that sound like? That's it. Yeah? That's what presents itself. Instead of agonizing over, well, I'm not quite sure. Is the timing right? Is this really where I want to be? Do I really want to do this? Do I want to call myself that? This is what it is. But the important thing, while we have this time, we have a short amount of time when we come to retreat, yeah? We shake up all the sand and the mandala goes out of focus, yeah? And in that time, you can recognize any state, yeah? When you reset your intention, the mandala forms again, yeah? So just use this wisely, yeah? Use this wisely, just like we say every night. Awaken, take heed, do not squander your life. It's a beautiful thing we've all been given. Call it what you will. Yeah. Well, what's the next thing we do?
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
For someone who doesn't know the term for the cook, and the way you interpreted it, it's certainly this koan, certainly one way. But I was wondering, by kicking the water jug, then actually you can no longer call it a water jug. It's a pieces of thing and water. You see what I mean? It's just the way it is.
Yes, you've altered it, you've interacted with it in a way that shows its true nature. Right? That's the idea here. That you're past any notion of naming. So the head monk kind of gets it backwards, right? He says, well, you can't call it a wooden sandal. Is that true? You can call it whatever you want. Right? You can call it, a jug of olive oil, but it doesn't matter what you call it. If you really want to know what it is, interact with it. Interact with it. Demonstrate its nature. And that's what he did. This was a vessel that held water when it was upright. Not when it's in this attitude, it didn't. Now, everybody, there's no question as to the essence of this object, yes? It was made clear by our interaction. And you want to know what compassion is? You don't talk about it all the time, yeah? If somebody is crying, you hold them. Yeah,
you just said something really important to me. If you want to know the essence of something, you interact with it. I mean, I'm not saying that you didn't say that before in many other words, but something just struck me. If you want to know the essence of something, you interact with it. Wow. Whew.
So there's another koan that reflects back on the Platform Sutra. And there's a monk who is pursuing the sixth Zen patriarch, Daikan Ino, hoping to recover his robe and his bowl and assume the patriarchship himself. Yeah, and so he's running. He goes over hill and over dale, and he gets there to see the monk. And Daikan Ino lays out the robe and the bowl on a rock and says, "Just take it." And the monk, after some reflection and an attempt to collect it and realizing that it's too big to hold anyway, it's not what he really wanted, says, you know what? I'm just came for the Dharma, actually. So if you could just work with me on that and teach me. And so we don't know necessarily the essence of the interaction that goes on between teacher and master after that point. But when it is done, we know that he asks, the monk says, okay, now I have it. And he says, says, really, what do you have? And he says, I now am like a man who drinks a glass of water and knows for himself whether it's warm or cold. That was the content of his awakening. And Master Ino says, that's good. Passes him transmission. He's headed south. He says, I want you to head north. Go teach everyone you find on the way. So in other words, that alone, just that deep recognition, intimacy with your life, that demonstration, his explanation, was enough for Ino to go, yes, you've penetrated this matter. Isn't that amazing? Well, I know that. Where's my robe and my pole? Yeah. Do you? Huh? Do we? A lot of times we sit here trying to make decisions that aren't decisions. My favorite students come to see me. I'm facing this great decision. Yeah. They explain the decision. I'm like, no, there's no decision here. There's just what's in front of this. This is your life. This is what it is. This is it. There's no decision. If the decision is to go back to sleep, stay engaged, that's a possible decision. Yeah. If you want to try balancing yourself on a fence on one toe, we could do that for a while. It's not going to last a very long time. You're going to get tired quickly. Yeah. Sounds like we got to turn around and we got to face this. Sounds like we got to walk into this. Sounds like we got to kick over some water jugs. Yeah. Recognize things for what they are. Appreciate them directly. Sorry, I missed you, Isabella. I should have asked if there were.
That's fine. Thank you.
It's wonderful practicing with you all the way in New York. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm happy to be with you all.
Right now, prepare for lunch. All right.